Hello and welcome to the Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, David Tavernor, and in this series we dig beneath the surface to uncover what's really happening inside the Black Soldier Fly industry. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, David Tavernor, and I've got a really interesting guest today, one that I'm super excited to have on. I visited his facility at Chanzi, or his business Chanzi, 2 different sites actually, one in Kenya near Nairobi and one in Tanzania in the north at Arusha, which was their original site. And this is a company that I've got great admiration from. If you read my blogs, then you will know that Chanzi are what I believe a fantastic company and a real pioneer in this space. So without further ado, I'll welcome you to the podcast, Andrew Wallace. How are you doing, Andrew?
Very well, mate. Thanks for getting me on. Big fan of what you're doing. I think a lot of your blogs are pretty truthful and get straight to the point. And I do believe you're one of the most well-informed people in the insect protein industry globally, having visited over 50 farms around the world yourself. So a lot of time for what you're saying, what you're doing. Very excited to be on.
Good stuff. What I want to start with is I want to know, before Black Soldier Fly, your story getting up to the point of Black Soldier Fly, and it will just help contextualize this conversation.
Yeah, so I've done a number of different things in East Africa. I've been in East Africa most of my life. I've managed small, medium, large businesses. I kind of do 2 years. I knew I always wanted to start my own business, so I kind of decided let's do 2 years at each. I then was a bit of a sellout and joined the UN. I did that for 2 years and achieved absolutely nothing, but it paid well. It paid pretty well, and it set me up financially to then have the freedom to start looking at the startup world, knowing that obviously running my own business was the end goal. When it comes to starting a business, I believe it's a case of jump or be pushed. And to be brutally honest, I was too much of a pussy to start my own business. There was always an excuse why I shouldn't do it and whatever. So I actually joined a startup instead of starting my own business. And that business was Victory Farms, which was East Africa's largest and fastest growing aquaculture business. And I got a job as ops director for them. I have to say, of all the different segments, whether it's small, medium, large, multinational, UN, startup was my favorite, and it reinforced this belief that I wanted to be in a startup environment. When it comes to fish farming or any livestock farming, as I'm sure you're aware, your single biggest cost center is feed. Now, as ops director, I'm looking at, okay, well, how can we optimize? How can we increase efficiency? How can we reduce cost and increase profitability? So let's start with the largest cost center, that's feed. And then if you delve deeper into feed, your biggest cost center within feed is protein. So feed might represent 70% of cost, and protein might represent more than half of your feed cost. So your protein accounts for about a third of overall livestock farming costs. It's your single biggest cost center. So why don't we tackle the biggest issue first? And that's pretty normal behavior when it comes to any business. I think Rockefeller said it, start with your biggest problem first. So let's tackle protein. Most of the protein we were using was either imported, volatile in price, quality. It was synthetic protein or locally sourced fish meal, soya. As our industry knows, they are very reliable, price volatile, poor quality products to be using as a protein source. And so I started to look at different protein sources, and insect protein came across my desk. I'll be honest, I dismissed it. I thought it was some wishy-washy, left-wing, greenwashing, tree-hugging bollocks. But I thought, you know what, don't knock it till you've tried it. So I managed to get my hands on a decent amount of insect protein in East Africa, and we produced 4.5 tons of fish feed using insect protein. We ran a feed trial, and those fish on an insect protein diet came back 23% heavier than control. We had to check the figures 2 or 3 times, didn't believe it. If it had been 2.3%, that would have been a good return. But 23% really did kind of solidify this idea that, hang on a second, this protein is actually superior. And when you delve into the science, it makes sense. People call it, what did Cargill say? He said it's the most promising novel feed ingredient of the 21st century. And I'm like, well, thank you, Cargill, but it's not novel. Feeding insects to animals like tilapia and chicken, that's not anything new. That's what they would have ordinarily been eating. It's not a novel protein, it's an original protein. So yeah, it all made sense, and the figures proved it. But the issue then was, well, how are we going to get this protein? Because no one was producing it at scale viably in a way that could actually satisfy the huge demand coming from the animal feed industry in East Africa. I kind of had this idea at the back of my mind that I always wanted to do insect protein, but I needed to find a model that worked. And that's when I met my now business partner, Sune. Um, he's an architect and engineer by profession. And he was having his own kind of backstory, came across insect protein through another avenue. When I looked at his model, it just made sense compared to every other insect protein production model that I'd seen. And that kind of one thing led to another. And I'll finish with, I remember I said, you're jump or you're pushed. The real push for me was COVID. I actually went from Kenya to Tanzania for a weekend to play a rugby match. On that Sunday, the border was shut. I couldn't get back to Kenya. So kind of stuck there, twiddling my fingers, thinking, oh, what do I do with my life? And I had no real option. I had to do something. And I managed 2 weeks on a beach reading Wilbur Smith before I kind of got bored of that and thought, no, let's actually take this idea off the shelf. I gave Sune a call. I said, do you want a business partner? And that was how Chanzi started.
Wow. Okay. So pretty prosperous rugby match. Very opportunistic. And you guys are triathletes as well, right? Running up Kilimanjaro and cycling through the Serengeti and whatever it is.
That's how Sune and I originally met, competing against each other on triathlons. He's a man of few words, but I managed to speak to him after a race, and kind of one thing led to another. We started speaking about insects of all things, and that's how I found out what he did.
Nice. Who won the race?
That particular race, I won on a sprint finish, and
Nice.
I don't let him live it down. But he's more of an ultra. He's an ultra endurance athlete. So anything over 10-kilometer run, I can't. That's when I start fading.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, so I wanted to dig into your partnership with Sooner, actually. I was lucky enough for him to spend the day with me in Arusha, and he showed me everything he's been working on. And he took me on a landfill, which was pretty eye opening, coming from a very sheltered background in the UK. And exactly how he came up with all of the ideas. So tell me, what are your goals together, or do you have separate goals, or do you have aligned goals? What do you want to achieve with Chanzi?
So remember I said Sune came at this business from a different angle. His family originally come from the lake zone in Tanzania, and that's his origins. And he read that fish stocks in Lake Victoria were 20% now what they were when he grew up, and the biggest cause of that decimation of fish stocks has been the animal feed industry. So he decided, okay, let me use my skills as an architect and an engineer to develop a sustainably sourced protein that might offset that demand for unsustainably sourced fish meal. So that's how he came into it. The key thing with Sune is I believe a lot of people in the insect protein industry are either coming from a scientific background or they're coming from a tree hugging background. He comes at it from a very practical engineering background. How do you make things work? How do you make it as efficient as possible? How do you reduce cost? How do you make this model viable and functional and locally applicable? And that really is what differentiates him from the other people that I've seen. When it comes to insect protein, his model isn't perfect. We're not aiming to build these super high-tech, highly automated farms, temperature control, climatic control. We're not aiming to do that. We're aiming to get the job done in a way that makes sense. And so Sune built 12 different designs for insect protein facilities. Over the course of a couple of years, he kind of meticulously collected data, trial and error, two steps forward, one step back, until he arrived on a design that he thought this makes sense. And that's conveniently where I entered the fray. He'd done a lot of the hard work before I joined him. I knew nothing about insect protein. I knew that it worked in fish feed. I'd seen that much, but I had nothing else to add, apart from the fact that I had run successful businesses in the past. So I said to Sune, look, that's what I can offer. I can take this. I can make it a business. I can take your idea, turn it into a business, and then scale it. And so that's where we partnered. And I do believe that we get on incredibly well. We're very different people with immensely different skill sets, and the two seem to complement each other incredibly well.
It sounds about right. And that's from my 3 years in the industry and 2 years spent traveling the world and writing a report on it. That is one thing that I would agree with you on that, but I think it's crucial. And I think engineering is an area that should be valued extremely highly in order to get your system right, because part of the problem with black soldier fly, in my view, is the rearing of the maggots. It's insanely difficult to do at a low cost. So engineering the system is vitally important. You've got the other costs as well, such as the feedstock and the eggs or the neonates, whatever you want to call them, the inputs essentially, which will kind of fluctuate, come down based on the area you're in. But the labor, the energy, the land rent, whatever it might be in the system, and that's kind of tied to the system, that's insanely important. So yeah, tell me a bit more about this system and what makes it so great.
Chanzi's model, yeah, so a few benefits. Number one, we use genuine waste. A lot of insect protein companies in the world, they go with a high-tech, highly automated model. What that means is that their cost per square meter of A, buying the infrastructure, and B, operational costs, mean that you need to be super efficient with how you grow. And your biggest determinant of growth rates is input, garbage in, garbage out. So what they tend to use is actually nutritionally dense feedstock. Things that, if we're being brutally honest, aren't necessarily waste, agricultural byproducts. We don't have that where we are. There isn't a formalized aggregation of agricultural byproducts. So we have to use post-consumer waste. Our model being pretty low tech, it allows us to be slightly less efficient per square meter because it costs us a lot less. Next, we make use of the geographical climatic blessing that we have. We're growing a tropical insect in the tropics. So we don't need to invest a lot of money into climatic control, temperature control. We get a steady 12 hours of sunlight a day. The temperature is pretty conducive. So we don't need to invest in that. Remember I said Sune is an architect and an engineer by profession, and he's brutally practical with the model that he's designed. He's made it locally applicable. Our labor really isn't as expensive as it would be in the Netherlands, for example. So we can afford to walk the line between mechanized and labor-intensive production. Each one of our sites employs about 23 staff. And a lot of that is men with shovels and guys putting waste directly into grinders and that sort of thing. And we're in an environment where we need employment. We need jobs. So that's another thing. So, all in all, we're producing insect protein a hell of a lot cheaper than anyone else that I've seen around the world. And I believe it makes sense. It has to. You have to produce the product at a price point that is competitive. Remember, the things that we're out competing, soya, fish meal, you need to outcompete them on price and quality, and our model allows us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you had 23 people in a site in the UK, you'd be getting on towards £400,000. So what, $500,000, $500,000? You've got to produce a lot of output to pay for that, plus the energy. So really great that you're using all of these local benefits, such as the energy of the sun and the cheaper labor. Do you think then the model of producing in places like East Africa is something that can be exportable in the future? And do you think potentially if insect farming is going to be around, then you're set to benefit from export?
Would I export my business to a middle-income country? No. It relies on being in a developing nation like the countries that we operate, Kenya, Tanzania. So would I export it to somewhere with a moderate climate? No, our model wouldn't work. But one thing I do know is from spending a lot of time with engineers, it's a lot easier to up tech something than it is to down tech, if you know what I mean. We can always make our model more automated. It's very difficult to go the other way. So I do think as we develop, we are constantly looking at ways to mechanize in the future to make it, something that we can then export to middle income countries.
Andrew, that's really interesting. Could you just give like an example or dig into that further, please?
Well, yes. I guess if you take, for example, a dryer. So if you take a super high-tech dryer and you install it in a facility, that does a lot of drying in a small amount of space efficiently within a certain amount of time. If you were then to kind of downgrade that, it's very difficult to expand in an area that you've already allotted to it. Just from what I've seen, it doesn't work a down tech. Conversely, we started sun drying, which was very inefficient space wise and very inefficient labor wise. And then through 12 different iterations, we've arrived on the drying machine that we now have. And each one is better than the last. And it's very easy to go through that progression.
Yes. Okay. So it's kind of, I mean, Elon Musk did it the opposite way, didn't he? Where he went full automation and then he realized he walked the factory floor famously during his surges and pointed at all of the different things that he didn't need. And he started wiping out automation, saying, no, we don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. Humans can do it better. But you've done it the opposite way.
Yeah, and we'll continue to do it. That gives our engineering department something to work towards, to keep them busy. And I do think if we do ever go into kind of a middle income country, there'll be a hybrid model that we'll need to create. Maybe look at some of the guys producing in South Africa. I've got a lot of time for some of their models and think, okay, maybe that's something that's more applicable for middle income countries or countries that have a winter. But where we are, you know, take that dryer example. It's or a conveyor. A conveyor costs $40,000. So if I'm loading a machine using a conveyor belt, or I could do it with two guys that cost, $5.50 cost a company per day. It's like, well, what's your payback period on that conveyor? I think I'd rather give the two guys and their families food on the table and money and decent employment. So
Exactly.
that's always a way of looking at it.
Yes, yes. So the lesson here, in my view, then, is staying agile rather than super efficient, but strive for efficiency. And that agility will kind of enable that.
Correct. And we're in an environment where we can do that. And so that's kind of what we're building towards.
Yeah, and to use the example of a few failures in the industry or unfortunate failures, I should say, such as Insect and Agri-Nutris, etc., where they have put up huge factories, fixed machinery, and even robotics, which are extremely bespoke. Once you've invested in that sort of thing, it has to work. If it doesn't work, tough. You've paid for it, and you're not going to be able to pay the money back as a result.
Correct.
And so, like you said, you can retrain people. Those people who are loading the dryer instead of a conveyor belt. Once you get the conveyor belt, because it's the right thing to do, you've increased your scale or whatever it might be, then those people can be retrained to do something else, whereas a robot or machines can't necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, we divided our growth into kind of different stages, and there was a fundamental question at each stage. We didn't aim for a super high tech farm straight away. And so if you look at our questions, question number one, can we grow insects? Well, Sune answered that in the first 2 years. Question number two, can we grow insects at scale? So we took Sune's farm, which I think had 6 greenhouses, and we expanded it to 42. And that got us to a site where we're processing somewhere between 18 and 27 tons of waste a day. The next question was, well, can we grow insects at scale at different locations, multiple locations? So we started doing that. And, you start learning, okay, your model can be pretty simple, but now you need the tech. And so although we're not very high tech when it comes to our infrastructure, our digital management systems do need to be quite high tech. And so that's something that we've learned. So now we've brought in an IT department and a CTO. And so that's where we're investing in tech. It's in the management systems rather than in fancy dryers and automated machines and robotic arms and whatnot. And so then the final question will be, well, can we scale this thing continentally? And I believe that we're getting to the point where we can. We're at 4 sites across East Africa. They're churning out decent volumes. The unit economics just about make sense. And so that's kind of where we're at now. And so I think in the next 18 months, we'll probably look to trigger an expansion that takes us to dozens of sites across.
Excellent. And so, how have you been financing all of this? I guess, first of all, the research and development, and perhaps even prior to when you joined, how did Sune finance it? And then a follow-on question, preloading it, how are you looking to finance this expansion across Africa?
Yeah. So early finance came from Sune and myself. So we put in a lot by our standards to get it off the ground and to get proof of concept. As a lot of startups do, FFF, friends, family, and fools, that gets you your first commercial facility. We then started to look to raise proper finance, so from VC, impact investors, family offices. So we did our first capital raise, I think, in 2022. We've supplemented that with research and development grants. We've been quite clever in the way we've raised. So often when it comes to solving a waste problem, that's something that people will pay for. So one of our key strategic investors is AB InBev, the world's largest beer company. Now they've got a problem where they're unable to dispose of brewers' spent yeast. And it was costing them a lot of money, about $150,000 per year per brewery. Thankfully for us, the insects, the black soldier fly larvae actually happily consume brewers' spent yeast. So that was a strategic investment where they fronted us the cash to expand our facilities so that we were able to increase our capacity and take their brewers' spent yeast from them. So we now have 2
It's a
breweries.
win-win.
It's win-win, yeah. And I mean, they're saving over $100,000 a year now by sending us their yeast, as opposed to where it would go otherwise, which would be
Where would it go? Yeah.
landfill or worse. We're in an environment where regulation around waste management is poor, and so there's always, I mean, take Dar es Salaam, for example, 20% of waste that's produced in the municipality is accounted for. 80%, we don't know where it goes. I mean, of course, we see it in our streets and our rivers and washing up on our beaches, but
And
regulation.
inside of it sometimes.
Yeah. And so we do have an obligation to solve our continent's waste problem. And I think the insect protein, especially Chanzi's model, plays a key role in that. When it comes to waste management, organic waste is the most difficult waste stream to solve. It's the most volatile. It's the least valuable. It rots, it stinks, it smells. And then environmentally, it breaks down and emits methane and nitrous oxide, which are both considerably worse than CO2 as greenhouse gases. So we've solved the biggest problem first, or at least we have a solution to the biggest problem first. And I think that then, I guess, opened the door to the next part of our business, which was the waste management company that we started 2 years ago.
Tell me about that. We haven't spoken about that yet.
Yeah. So I think in the same way that the animal feed industry, or the livestock rearing business looks at feedstock as its single biggest headache, insect protein is no different. Where am I going to get? The first question we ask before we open a facility, where are we going to get 18 tons of food waste day in, day out? It doesn't just arrive on your doorstep. You need to find ways of doing it. Now, that could be through contracts with food processing industry, fruit and veg processors, that sort of thing. But it's very unwise to rely on 1 or 2 contracts. So then you start looking at, well, what if we were to do market waste aggregation projects? So we looked at that. But the most reliable form of post-consumer food waste is from households. They will, day in, day out, whether they want to or not, produce waste. Where we are, we produce considerably less waste per capita than where you are, but nonetheless, they are producing waste day in, day out. The question is, how do you get that waste? How do you separate it? How do you get it out of people's kitchens and into our insect farms? We tried and failed at a number of different household waste separation projects. It seems very simple to me. Have a blue bin and a green bin in your kitchen. How hard can it be? Apparently very hard. And it only takes one arsehole to put a bottle in a green bin, and we need to sort through it anyway. So it just didn't work. But what we did do, and we stumbled across this, yes, by serendipity, is in Kenya, we partnered with the largest recycling company, a company called Taka Taka Solutions. They were receiving mixed municipal solid waste. They were putting it through a material recovery facility where they would sort it into 40 different fractions. And once they had extracted all the inorganics, the glass, the plastics, the metals, the cardboards, what's left at the end is two types of organic waste. Your food waste, which is what we want, and your foliage, your leaves, your twigs,
The
your grasses.
green waste.
Lignocellulose, if you're being scientific. And so our partnership with them was quite simple. They were trying to compost it, which wasn't viable. It was losing them money. So we said, look, we're willing to invest a little bit of money into that final sorting step to get it into the food and the other. You give us all of your organic food waste. We'll take it off your hands, no problem. And we'll process it into insect protein. And it's a win-win. And so that collaboration worked really, really well. And it basically guaranteed that every single day, 20 tons of post-consumer food waste would rock up on our doorstep. And we're probably the only company that you can do that to. And we'll say, thank you very much. Same time again tomorrow, please. And it worked. So that collaboration was fantastic. The issue was in Tanzania, that company didn't exist. There wasn't a single waste management company that was willing to separate waste. They hadn't got beyond let's collect waste, dump it in landfill or worse, and charge people for that service. And so we had to create that company ourselves. And so that's why we founded Akota. And now the two businesses work hand in hand. So Akota provides that function of collecting and receiving mixed municipal solid waste, sorting it, extracting all the inorganics, and then obviously having a reliable stream of organic waste that goes next door to Chanzi. The inorganic business, it's opened up a completely new can of worms, excuse the pun. But that's not the topic of this podcast. But yeah, it's meant that Chanzi and our site managers can just focus on the production. They don't need to worry about where their input's going to come from. That's sorted by the waste management company, and we can expand. And when I say expand, we can now go to any city with a holistic solution to their waste management problems, which combines waste sorting, separation, recycling, and upcycling. And between the two businesses, we can process over 90% of waste. You asked a question earlier, which is, how do I see our business expanding and how do I see our business raising cash? It's no secret that Africa has a waste problem, that the world has a waste problem, and we can bury our heads in the sand and try and ignore it. But the reality is it's only going to get worse. Waste generation in Africa is going to triple in my lifetime. We have a solution to that. And personally, I believe it's a solution that people are willing to pay for. It's certainly something they should be paying for.
So I've got two questions, actually. I'll start with playing more of devil's advocate. In Europe, obviously where I'm based, we've got anaerobic digestion, and it's solved the energy security issues of 30 years ago. It's processing a hell of a lot of food waste. Why can't you just use anaerobic digestion instead of insects?
So anaerobic digestion being like what, biodigesters, that sort of thing?
Biogas, exactly. Turning food waste into energy via a chemical process.
Yeah, so there's been a few companies that are trying to do that. From my understanding, they've failed because of, number one, the critical mass. I believe you need kind of at least 50 tons of food waste a day to make it work, maybe more. I don't believe it's a particularly efficient way of converting waste to energy. I don't know a huge amount about it, so don't quote me on this. The waste that you're using, is that separated in the UK?
Yeah, yes. So it's separated food waste. Again, I'm not an expert in this industry either, but it does get mixed with energy crops, manures, which are obviously a lot more homogeneous, as well as food waste, which is not so homogeneous but can give off a fair amount of energy. And I believe a lot of the issues with anaerobic digestion is that it is finding that right mix, because the chemical process to optimize it can be extremely volatile or fragile. And so you need to get that mix right. And if you if you get it slightly wrong, it can knock it off its course a fair bit, and you won't get that productivity out of the system as much. But if you get it right, it can work. But having said that, we've also subsidized the hell out of anaerobic digestion. So what is actually the are they myth? Is it a myth or is it reality? I don't know really.
I don't know the answer, but what I can say, I can only speak from our context. So number one, you probably have a community or a society that have now got into the habit of waste separation, but that's taken a good 20 years to achieve. And I don't know how much money has been invested by communities and governments, municipalities into getting people to separate their waste into different categories. Personally, I do not, and as I said, we've tried and failed a number of household waste separation projects. I don't believe it's your best use of time and money, especially when we've invested in material recovery facilities which can receive mixed waste. It can accept that people aren't going to separate their waste anytime soon. It can accept that even if they are, it's going to take years and years to get that sort of behavior. It can take into account that we're in East Africa where, let's be honest, people have bigger issues than what bin they're putting their waste in. They just want it out their house. They're busy. They've got problems. And our material recovery facilities employ hundreds of staff to separate that waste, and people need jobs. So I do believe investing in material recovery facilities is a far better idea than investing into community campaigns to get waste separation done at source. The second thing, so that's how we would divide our waste. And now let's say you've got this waste that's now been divided into organic and inorganic. Why would I favor insect protein over anaerobic digestion? Well, number one is, what are you trying to achieve with anaerobic digestion? Well, you're trying to get energy. You're trying to get electricity. And we're in a part of the world where we actually got access to far more renewable sources of energy than you might in the UK. We've got infinite amount of sun. If you look at Kenya, I believe it's one of the countries with the highest levels of renewable energy because of geothermal, because of wind, because of hydropower, and because of solar. So we don't have that same problem, unlike you guys who are, much more reliant on gas from Russia or oil from wherever. We already have quite a high level of renewables. So we're not solving a problem necessarily there. And then if you look at the alternative, which is what I'm advocating for, which is insect protein, well, insect protein is combating a problem that does exist, i.e. fish meal and soya, and a growing demand for protein with a population that is rapidly adopting meat into their diets and an unsustainable broken food system. So we are solving a problem by turning it into insect protein. We wouldn't be solving such a huge problem by turning it into energy. And again, I don't know the unit economics of converting it into energy, but it's certainly not going to be something that the government subsidizes. You can't even get purchasing power agreements with the national grid here. So I wouldn't advocate for it.
Yeah, fair enough. There's a long way to go with some of the economies you're working in. I wish that you could make energy out of boring grey weather, because the UK would be the top energy provider then.
Or negativity. If you could harness public negativity and turn it into energy, I think you'd be fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah, we'd smash it. So on the insects versus anaerobic digester debate, when I was in South Africa, I met a guy called Sam Smout, he's leading the kind of circular economy of organics in the Western Cape, where Cape Town is based. And they've recently passed, I think this year, a zero organics to, or it might be zero organics to landfill policy for the Western Cape. And I don't know if that kind of results in just trucking it over the border into the next region and tipping it there. I'm not sure. But he did identify a few different things, being composting, AD, and incineration, and insects. And his conclusion was insects is the way forward. So they're kind of putting all of their eggs in the insect basket, which kind of makes you think, if we knew about insects 30, 40 years ago, like we do now, then perhaps Europe would have taken a different direction in terms of the biogas and subsidizing biogas, and perhaps looked more seriously at insects. And that's kind of what I'm up against alongside my European peers where we're based. But from what you've said, it sounds like East Africa is perfectly poised for insect protein and waste management, etc. Talk to me about those markets then. We've spoken a lot about the waste market and actually monetizing the non-recyclables a bit, which is a separate conversation. So talk to me about your outputs, frass, protein. I mean, you've even explored biochar, I know. So just talk to me about all of this.
Yeah. So the insect protein side of our business, which is Chanzi, they produce two products. We have two inputs. We have food waste and we have the other organic waste. So non-food organics, lignocellulose, the grasses, the twigs, the leaves, that sort of stuff. We call it grade C for simplicity. So the grade A food waste all goes through our grinders, turned into a slurry, pumped into greenhouses, little 4-day-old larvae added, and then within 10 days they're ready for harvest, and that's what we turn into a dried insect protein, which we sell to the animal feed industry. There's what comes out the rear end of those larvae, which is manure, and that is an incredibly good fertilizer. Again, we have a soil crisis in East Africa. I think we have it all over the world, but I know it's particularly bad in East Africa. People haven't fertilized their soil. Synthetic fertilizers aren't always the answer. And so we have another valuable product that we sell there. As for the grade C, that lignocellulose waste, we convert that into biochar. Now, why do we do that? Well, number one, because we need to get rid of it. Grade C waste is the single largest component going to our continent's landfills. It makes up about 35-40%. When it goes to landfill, it breaks down and emits methane. So it's a problem environmentally. By converting it into biochar, we massively reduce its volume. And then what we do with that biochar is we mix it in with our frass. And so what we're selling is a frass plus biochar product, which obviously the frass improves the soil health. The biochar improves the soil structure, the water retention, the microbial activity. And finally, it sequesters CO2. So farmers that are buying our frass plus biochar product are inadvertently turning their farms into carbon sinks. I do think when it comes to combating climate change, one of the best ways to do it is do it without people realizing, or do it without people caring. I might solar power my house, not because I necessarily care about the environment. I just know it's cheaper and it's more reliable. And that's when you've won. And it's the same with these farmers. They don't necessarily know or care about climate change. Indirectly, they're feeling the effects of it, but now they've literally are combating climate change by buying our product and simply using it because it's increasing their crop yields and the profitability of their farming.
Yeah, I think it's probably unfair to say people don't care about it. People do care about it, but it's just not high on their priority list. It's feeding their family, which is the most important. And then once you've done that, it's making a profit so you can live a prosperous life.
Yeah,
I think. And
I think
as you
in our
said,
part
if
of the
you
world they
can do it
care
with you-
about it they care about it because they feel the effects directly. I mean, especially where we are, increase. If you look at the incidence of drought, they all seem to be disproportionately in the last 10 years, and each 10 years gets worse than the previous 10 years. So they are feeling it. They might not necessarily know that it's the problem, but also I do think there's this element of humanity where, yes, we say we care about climate change, but when push comes to shove, most people, I'm going to sound quite critical here and skeptical, but as someone that works in the waste management industry, I know this to be quite true. There's a huge element of, yeah, I'll say one thing, but in reality, I'll do another.
We've spoken about the costs and we've spoken about a lot of the different revenue streams, including carbon credits, which is very interesting. So the question on everyone's lips is this a profitable model? Because insects has come under a lot of stick for profitability.
Yeah. So we have, I'm proud to say, I think we're the only insect protein facilities in the world that are break even, if not profitable. Um, the if you look at our production costs, we can run a facility for about $8,000 a month, and that facility can produce anywhere between 8 and 12 tons of dried insect protein a month. Systems are followed and everything goes to plan. We're selling at $1 a kilo. So if we sell all of our insect protein, our site is broken even, which means that whatever frass fertilizer and biochar that we sell is our profit margin. Whatever carbon credits we sell, that goes towards profit margin. And whatever we manage to make in terms of waste aggregation contracts, that also goes to profit margin. As a business, it's still a difficult one. As I said, we're profitable at site level, but then we've got our head office. So my costs, our IT department, engineers, our finance, we still need to improve at what we're doing in order to make the whole business profitable. I always joke, I've been doing this for 5 years now. If you'd have told me 5 years ago you would dedicate your entire professional career to running a business that just about doesn't lose money, I would have thrown that out straight away. But it's been an incredible journey, and we're at the stage now where it's making sense. Um, one
You're a
more,
farmer, Andrew. That's what farmers do.
yeah. One more thing though, I will mention is insect protein has only been around for about 10, 15 years, if that. If you look at the chicken industry, which has been around for 100 years, and you look at what that's done, how that's grown over the last, 100 years, in the 90s, 1960s, if you took a 6-week-old broiler, it was about 0.8 kilos, less than a kilo. If you look at one now, it's anywhere between 3.5 and 4.2. So your size of a chicken has increased 5-6-fold in the last 60 years. I fully expect the same thing to happen in insect protein, but to have Chanzi's model now be break even, the future's bright. It's only going to improve from here. Our food conversion ratios, which a lot of insect protein companies in the West will laugh at, are about 8.5%. If we're still talking in 5 years' time and my food conversion ratio is 8.5%, I will have failed somehow. I fully expect them to get to 20 plus. And as a result, the profitability of the business will only improve further.
Yeah, the chicken industry is clucking crazy, isn't it? So this is really promising. You've outlined the opportunities. What do you think are the challenges that you are willing to share with this audience? Because I think, if there are people entering the market or already in the market, they would love to hear what you think the risks are to this.
Yeah. So when I look at our competitors, I don't necessarily view them as competitors. I think it's our collective responsibility to grow the industry, and I don't like. We're incredibly open, as you've seen, about our model. Anyone can come and visit. We're
Yeah.
super transparent with our machinery and our methods. But what I've seen is that they've gone one of two ways, and obviously you've got your super high tech model, which I don't think we're ready for yet. I'm not saying that won't be the farms of the future, but companies like Chanzi need to show that it is viable for us to get to there. I think that they are trying to run before we walk, and Chanzi are walking, but at least we're walking and we haven't folded like, some of these high tech guys. They spent too much too quick. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got these small insect farms, and that's what most of the ones in East Africa are like. Little mum and pop shops or backyard operations. Basically, how Sune started. Something that we've learned: our sites break even at 14 tons of waste a day, and I think that's a reality that people need to understand. People especially there's a lot of money in the aid world going into smallholder insect farming, and they'll often approach me and say, "Can you support this smallholder insect farming project? Can you train them?" No, I can't. On a moral ground, I can't, because I know that the business doesn't make sense unless you're hitting that critical mass of 14 tons a day. And a smallholder farmer isn't going to do that, because where are they going to aggregate 14 tons of waste? Even if they were to aggregate 14 tons of waste, your waste processing platform for that amount of waste would be about $35,000. That's not cash that a smallholder farmer's got. And if he has, number one, he's not a smallholder farmer. But number two, invest it in something else. Go and do something that, a proven business model, rather than doing something that's, on the ascendancy. So no, you've got to hit that sweet spot. And that's where we're at. And thankfully, I believe we've chosen the right model, at least for now. Thankfully, we've made it kind of at least show signs of viability. I do believe it's the model that is going to be the one that we progress with as an industry. And that's, we're lucky and fortunate enough to be in the right place, to make it work. We've got a lot going for us, but also there's been a lot of hard work. Sune's not stumbled across these ideas by accident. He's put a huge amount of work into creating our model, and the same for myself. It hasn't been an easy journey, but we are making it work by treating it as a business, not as a side hustle, but throwing everything we physically have into this. And so I do believe it is the model that's gonna progress. And I hope that there are other businesses that are with a similar mindset as ours in other parts of the world that are finding something that is locally applicable, that does make economic sense, and that is scalable. And I think that more and more examples like Chanzi are going to come out of the woodwork in different parts of the world. And And that's what's going to grow because it's a solution that the world needs. We have a waste problem. And I think that organizations like Chanzi are going to be the ones that are solving that in years to come.
Yeah, it's super commendable that you do open your doors so openly to the likes of myself, but to other people as well. Is there a danger that people will steal your model, do exactly what you're doing? I don't know, someone from Mozambique or Botswana comes over and steal and gets investments and does exactly what you're doing, and it closes those doors for you to do it there. Well, what's your view on it anyway?
Let them. Number one, we're operating in a market without much competition. I could do with some. Number two, if they take my model and do it better, then perhaps I might learn something off them. So fantastic. Number three, we're talking about a waste problem and how insurmountable this waste problem appears at the moment. I'm sat in Tanzania half the time. That's 23,000 tons of waste produced a day. Our business is processing just over 100. We have so far to go to even make a dent in this issue. Again, look at fish meal. Your fish meal demand by the Tanzanian chicken industry on a daily basis is over 30 tons. I'm producing just over a ton. So I'm not even 3% of the way there in Tanzania. And these problems are in Mozambique, they're in Angola, they're in Zambia, they're everywhere. So I can't move quick enough. I need them to take it on. So I'm quite happy for them to come on board.
Guess with the population increase in Africa as well, you're kind of up against it, aren't you? You need people there. So this is probably an international call for a huge open day at Chanzi in Tanzania or Kenya or wherever you want.
No, we're super open, and I think the other thing people realize that it isn't easy. You come and see our sites. It isn't an easy business to do. It requires grit. It requires thinking outside the box. It requires identifying the issues before they become issues. That's why we've invested so heavily in our ERP systems, our management tech. And I'll just say one thing on that is that the management tech allows us to replicate these sites. We believe that our infrastructure is the best for sub-Saharan Africa. I haven't seen anything as good as what Sune and his engineers have designed. But it's irrelevant unless you have the people and the management systems to operate that facility. We cannot, unlike the chicken industry, when we hire site managers, ask for people with 15 years experience. That doesn't exist. If you look at our organization, we've got almost 200 staff, and I believe 2 of them had experience in BSF before they joined Chanzi. So we cannot physically ask for that, which means that we need to have systems in place for them to follow and data collection mechanisms to ensure that they're doing it the right way, feedback, IT departments kind of analyzing that in the background. And so what our ERP allows us to do is to roll this business out continentally. And so what we will do as part of our expansion is, yes, we'll do it through Chanzi, but we'll also look for franchises. We'll also look for joint ventures. We'll also look for cities with waste problems who want us to come in and solve that and are willing to at least pave the way for us and or invest in our facilities to make it work. And our ERP and our digitized management systems will make that possible.
This is sounds like a really, really ambitious, but I'd say achievable plan. And I'd agree with you there that I probably haven't seen a better model out there from my experience around the world. It's certainly up there in the top 3. So hats off to you,
Music
Andrew.
to Sune's ears.
Yeah, he's done a fabulous job. Zooming out, we've already talked about the industry a little bit, and I'll draw this to a close soon. But before I do, what's your view on the black soldier fly industry outside of Africa, and where do you think it could work, and where do you think it won't work, or might be really difficult to do so?
Like I said, I think businesses only make sense if you're providing a better product for less. And that's what Chanzi can do. We can undercut fish meal, which solves what Sune wanted to start. When he started Chanzi, that was his kind of North Star. In the West, I don't believe you can do that, which means that you need to start looking at other ways of making it viable. Number one, you can sell on altruistic grounds. So people willing to pay more because it is a sustainably produced protein, or proving that it's significantly better so that people are willing to pay more. Number two is monetizing the waste management side of things. So people in the West are far more likely to pay money to have their waste sustainably disposed of. Your tipping fee in the United States per ton is about $55, whereas where we are, it's about $1. So monetizing the waste offtake side of things is something that you can do that we can't. But that's it. It comes down to simple unit economics. Can you sell this product for more than you can produce it for? Can you sell it for either undercut an existing competitor or prove that it's a better product, either on environmental grounds or quality grounds, so that people are going to pay what you need it to fetch in order to make your model viable.
Enough. I have one final question. What advice would you give to future Black Soldier Fly leaders or current leaders within the industry?
From our perspective, just looking at where what we've got right, what we've got wrong. I think take our board chairman. I'm very fortunate enough to have an incredibly good board of directors and cohort of shareholders who ask the right questions. But one of the things they really dwell on is unit economics, and I think you really do need to delve into that. The fact businesses like Insect were able to raise $500 million without anyone really questioning the unit economics is a problem. I don't quite understand that. I don't have $500 million, but if I did, I don't think I would invest in something that didn't have the unit economics kind of at least making sense. So that's the kind of fundamentals. Ask that about your model. Where we are, you play the field in front of you. Never go into a business where your business is reliant on fundamental assumptions changing. Know that people aren't going to divide their waste. And our business model plays that field. It's not a business model reliant on behavioral change. I don't think that's wise to do in any part of the world. So that's another one. Otherwise, you have to be adaptable. We're in a very nascent business. No one's done it before. No one's got it right before. There are no wrong answers, so to speak. And you need to constantly be analyzing, okay, what does work, what doesn't, and be adaptable. That's, I think, another key aspect to what at least an ethos that we've tried to maintain. As I said to you, I think if we're sitting here in 5 years and our model is the same and our food conversion ratios are the same, then Chanzi won't be sitting here in 5 years. We need to be adaptable. Like any business, you need to constantly be changing to solve problems that are constantly coming at you.
I would agree with all of those bits of advice. So thank you for that. He's not a tree hugger. He's not a tech bro, but he does know his numbers. It's Andrew Wallace. Thank you very much for such a fascinating conversation. And stay tuned for next week's guest, who I'm hoping is going to be Dean Smorenberg.
Very, very good man. A very, very good man. I've got a huge amount of respect for Dean and what he's doing, operating a completely different model. But again, he's operating it well. He's a businessman. He's, again, a very similar mindset to myself. I can't speak highly of him enough, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot from him and his experiences.
Great. I hope so. This has been Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. Thank you for listening, and join next week.